You know what's rare today? A woman who doesn't try to be respected but is. Not because she's louder, not because she's colder, but because her presence speaks for itself. See, men don't truly respect manipulation, they respect authenticity. And when a woman carries herself with quiet confidence, when her standards speak louder than her emotions, respect isn't requested, it's given. Let's talk about the things women do naturally that make men stop, listen, and honor them without being told to. You know, there's something deeply powerful about a woman who values her peace more than being right. A woman who doesn't need to raise her voice, prove her point, or win the argument to know her worth. That kind of calm, it's rare. And when a man sees it, it shifts something in him because he realizes this isn't about ego anymore. It's about peace. And peace is magnetic. We live in a world where everyone's trying to be louder than the next person. Everyone's trying to be heard, trying to prove that they matter. But when a woman chooses silence over shouting, when she chooses to walk away rather than wrestle for validation, she stands out. She carries a kind of strength that doesn't need to be advertised. Men notice that, not because she's detached, but because she's grounded. Because she's learned that not everything deserves her reaction, not every argument deserves her energy, and not every man deserves her explanation. See, respect comes from restraint. A woman who values her peace is a woman who understands her power. She's not cold, she's composed. And that composure, that calm confidence, tells a man that her emotions don't control her. She does. That's rare, that's attractive, that's respect worthy, because peace isn't passive, it's a choice. It's not weakness, it's wisdom. It's saying, I could argue with you, but I'd rather protect my energy. It's understanding that not every misunderstanding needs a reaction. Sometimes it just needs distance. When a man meets a woman like that, he knows he's not dealing with someone who's moved by impulse. He's dealing with someone who's intentional, someone who doesn't chase validation because she already carries it within herself. That's when respect enters the room because he realizes her silence isn't submission, it's strength, it's discipline. It's knowing that peace is more valuable than pride. There's something powerful about the way she handles tension. She doesn't need to make a scene to make a statement. She doesn't lose her cool when things get heated. She takes a breath, steps back, and lets her calm speak for itself. That's not easy. It takes emotional maturity to not let someone else's chaos pull you out of character. But that's exactly what separates her. She's not playing emotional ping pong. She's not fighting to be understood by someone who's not ready to listen. She knows when to engage and when to let go. And here's the thing, men, remember that. They remember the woman who handled conflict with grace. They respect the one who didn't need to tear them down to make a point. Because it's easy to get caught up in reaction. It takes strength to rise above it. The woman who values her peace teaches everyone around her how to treat her. She shows them that she won't be baited into chaos, that her emotional stability is not up for negotiation. That kind of energy commands attention. Not the kind that demands it, but the kind that earns it naturally. Because when you can stay calm in the storm, people start looking at you differently. They realize your silence isn't weakness, it's control. It's knowing that you can protect your peace without proving your power. And the truth is, peace is what men respect most. Not the noise, not the arguments, not the drama, but the peace. The calmness that makes them want to be better, talk softer, think deeper. The peace that reminds them not everything has to turn into a fight. Because when a woman values her peace, she doesn't just protect herself, she elevates everyone around her. That's the kind of woman a man can't forget. The one who doesn't try to dominate the room, but who changes its energy just by walking in. Respect doesn't come from what we demand, it comes from what we consistently live by. And when a woman has standards that she not only sets but honors, that's when a man truly takes notice. Because anybody can talk about boundaries. Anybody can post about self-worth or say they know what they deserve, but the woman who actually lives it, who follows through when it's inconvenient, when it's emotional, when it costs her something, that's the one who earns real respect. See, men respect women who mean what they say, not in a harsh or rigid way, but in a grounded, self-assured kind of way. When she says, "This is what I will," accept, and actually stands by it even when her feelings are involved, that's powerful because feelings change, chemistry fades, attraction comes and goes. But principles, those are what keep her steady. And when a man sees that she doesn't bend her standards just to be chosen, he starts to see her differently. He realizes she values herself too much to be treated halfway. A woman with standards isn't hard to please, she's hard to fool. She's not asking for perfection, she's asking for consistency. And when she doesn't get it, she doesn't throw a fit or beg for effort. She simply adjusts her presence. She pulls back. She lets her distance speak where words would be wasted. That quiet strength, that's what makes a man respect her. Because she's not trying to convince anyone of her worth, she's already convinced herself. And here's the truth. Standards aren't about control. They're not about changing someone else's behavior. They're about protecting your peace and defining your limits. It's saying, I can love you and still not tolerate certain things. It's separating compassion from compromise. And that distinction, men feel it. They might test it, they might question it, but deep down, they respect it. Because when a woman holds herself to a certain level, she invites everyone around her to rise or to quietly fall away. A woman like that doesn't just talk about self-respect. She demonstrates it in the small choices. The late night text she doesn't answer, the apology she doesn't chase, the silence she keeps when she knows her boundaries are being tested. Those moments speak volumes because they show that she'd rather disappoint someone else than betray herself. That's not ego, that's alignment. And that kind of alignment commands respect far more than words ever could. Men notice when a woman carries herself like that. They might not say it out loud, but it changes the way they show up. It changes the tone, the effort, the energy. Because deep down, they know they're dealing with someone who won't settle for potential, only for presence. Someone who doesn't confuse attention with effort or promises with actions. That kind of clarity earns admiration. What makes her so respected is that her standards aren't built on fear, they're built on value. She's not afraid of losing someone. She's afraid of losing herself in the process of keeping them. And that's the difference. When a woman chooses to honor her standards, even when her heart wants to make exceptions, she's telling the world, my worth doesn't fluctuate with your treatment. That truth, spoken or not, is what earns her respect. Because men may be drawn to beauty, they may be intrigued by charm, but they stay for substance. And nothing is more substantial than a woman who stands on her word. A woman who doesn't need to explain her worth because she lives it. A woman who knows that keeping her standards isn't about who she might lose, it's about who she refuses to become. That's the kind of woman men respect not because she demands it, but because she embodies it. One of the most powerful things a woman can do is listen, truly listen, without losing herself in the process. Because there's a quiet strength in being able to understand someone's point of view without agreeing with it, in hearing their emotions without absorbing their chaos. When a woman knows how to listen calmly but still stand in her truth, it changes the entire dynamic of how a man sees her. She becomes someone he can talk to, not someone he has to defend himself against. She becomes safe, not silent. See, communication isn't just about talking. It's about the energy behind how we talk. When a woman can hold space for someone's emotions without letting it shake her sense of self, that's emotional maturity at its finest. Men feel that difference. They respect the woman who doesn't need to win every conversation, who doesn't turn every disagreement into a battle, but instead responds with thoughtfulness and grace. It doesn't mean she holds back her truth. It means she delivers it with self-control. That's what sets her apart. There's a moment that happens in every healthy relationship where emotions rise, words get heavy, and someone has to choose peace over pride. And the woman who can breathe through that moment, who can respond instead of react, earns a kind of respect that can't be faked because it shows she's mastered her emotions instead of letting them master her. It shows she's capable of communicating to connect, not to compete. When she listens, she's not doing it to collect ammunition or prove a point. She's doing it to understand. And when she finally speaks, she does it with clarity, not volume. That difference changes everything. It turns tension into trust. Because men respect women who can disagree without disrespect, who can say, I understand how you feel, and still stand firmly in their own truth. It's not submission, it's balance. It's knowing that being kind doesn't mean being quiet, and being strong doesn't mean being loud. When a man meets a woman like that, he feels seen but also challenged. Because her calmness doesn't come from indifference, it comes from wisdom, it comes from experience. It's the kind of composure that says, I know who I am, and I don't need to raise my voice for you to hear me. That presence demands respect because it's rare. It's the kind of strength that doesn't bruise egos, it builds bridges. And here's the truth. Men may be drawn to looks or laughter, but they stay for peace, for that emotional steadiness that feels like home after a long day of noise. The woman who can talk through conflict without losing her calm creates a kind of safety that every man secretly craves. Not because she fixes everything, but because she reminds him that love doesn't have to be chaos. It's easy to listen when everything feels good. But the real test comes when things get hard, when voices rise, when words hurt, when egos clash. That's when listening becomes a form of strength. Because it's not about agreeing, it's about staying grounded enough to hear the other person out without letting it steal your peace. That's what real respect looks like in action. And the beauty of it is, when a woman communicates like that, she sets a standard without even saying it out loud. She teaches the man in front of her how to speak to her, how to handle her, how to treat her. Her energy says, you can talk to me about anything, but not in any way. That tone of respect becomes the foundation of everything else. Because men don't just respect a woman who speaks well, they respect the woman who listens well, who carries empathy and firmness in the same breath, the one who makes them feel heard while still holding her ground, the one who can speak with kindness and walk away with dignity. That's the kind of woman whose voice doesn't echo because it's loud. It echoes because it's earned. There's something quietly powerful about a woman who doesn't chase energy, but matches it. A woman who knows her worth so deeply that she refuses to beg for attention, argue for effort, or compete for consistency. She moves in alignment, not desperation. She's not cold or detached. She's just centered. And when a man meets a woman like that, he feels it instantly. He senses her balance. He respects her restraint. Because she doesn't need to force what's not flowing, she simply mirrors what's being given. See, chasing is loud. It's restless. It's born from fear, the fear of being forgotten, overlooked, or replaced. But matching energy is calm. It's secure. It's knowing that what's meant for you doesn't need to be begged for. It's choosing reciprocity over resistance. When a woman stops overextending herself for someone who gives her half effort, she sends a message without saying a word. She's saying, I value myself enough to step back when you step away. And that silence, it speaks volumes. Men notice that. They might not admit it at first, but they feel the difference between a woman chasing them and a woman choosing herself. The first feels heavy, the second feels freeing. Because deep down, every man respects a woman who can walk away from uncertainty with grace. She doesn't slam doors. She doesn't play games. She just quietly adjusts her energy to match his, and in doing so, she teaches him something about value. The truth is, effort is communication. When a man shows up halfway, he's saying something. When he becomes inconsistent, he's saying something. But the woman who values herself doesn't argue with those signals, she listens. She doesn't explain what he already knows. She doesn't try to remind him how good she is. She just mirrors back the energy he's chosen. And that's where her power lies. Not in convincing, but in allowing. What makes her so respected isn't that she's playing hard to get, it's that she's already gotten herself. She knows that chasing someone who's pulling away only teaches them that she'll tolerate imbalance. And she refuses that. Not because she's bitter, but because she's self-aware. Because she knows that real connection doesn't require her to beg for the basics. It should flow. It should feel mutual. It should feel safe. And when a man realizes she's not chasing him, he's forced to face his own effort. He starts reflecting on what she brought into his life, her peace, her consistency, her energy. And often that's when respect deepens. Because there's a difference between a woman who's available to everyone and a woman who's selective with her time. The selective one doesn't have to demand respect. It's given naturally because she respects herself enough to walk away from anything uncertain. This doesn't mean she's emotionless. It doesn't mean she doesn't care. It means she's emotionally intelligent enough to know that overgiving doesn't create love, it creates imbalance. And love built on imbalance never lasts. So instead of trying to pull more from someone, she matches what's given. And if it's not enough, she simply steps aside and makes room for what is. Her strength isn't in how much she can give, it's in knowing when to stop giving. Her power isn't in chasing, it's in choosing. And that choice sends a message louder than any argument ever could. Because when she matches energy, she's not mirroring attitude, she's mirroring effort. She's saying, if you care, I care. If you grow, I grow. But if you fade, I won't chase shadows. That's what men respect, the calm, confident energy of a woman who doesn't force connection. The one who doesn't beg to be seen because she already knows her value. The one who doesn't run after what's leaving, but walks with dignity toward what's real. That's the kind of woman whose silence demands more attention than her words ever will. There's a quiet kind of strength in a woman who can look at herself honestly and say, I was wrong. A woman who doesn't hide behind pride, who doesn't point fingers to protect her ego, but takes ownership of her part in the story. That's not weakness, that's maturity. That's what earns respect, because it's rare. Most people run from accountability, but when a woman faces it head on, she shows a man that she's not afraid of growth. And that kind of honesty, it hits differently. Men notice that. They notice when a woman can admit her mistakes without tearing herself down. They respect the woman who says, you're right, I could have handled that better. Not because she's trying to appease him, but because she's emotionally aware enough to take responsibility for her own actions. That's a level of strength that doesn't need to shout. It's calm, it's confident, it's real. See, accountability doesn't make you smaller, it makes you trustworthy. When a woman owns her mistakes, she's showing that she values truth over image, growth over comfort, and men can feel that. They can tell when they're dealing with someone who's not playing games, someone who's not trying to look perfect, but trying to be better. That's a rare kind of honesty that creates safety, because it tells a man, you don't have to be perfect either, you just have to be real. There's something freeing about that kind of energy. Because a woman who owns her flaws doesn't have to pretend. She doesn't build walls to protect her ego. She builds bridges through understanding. When conflict happens, she doesn't deflect, deny, or make excuses, she reflects. She looks inward, she learns, and she grows. That's emotional intelligence. And emotional intelligence commands respect far more than defensiveness ever could. It takes strength to look at your actions and see how they might have hurt someone else. It takes humility to apologize without attaching a justification to it. But that's exactly why it's so powerful. Because accountability shows character, it shows integrity, it shows that her self worth isn't fragile. It's grounded enough to withstand being wrong sometimes. And that kind of woman, she's not trying to be perfect, she's trying to be real. A man respects that because it's human, because it feels genuine. He doesn't have to tiptoe around her emotions or hide his own mistakes out of fear she'll weaponize them. Instead, he feels like he can breathe, like he can be honest too. And that's when respect deepens. Because the truth is, when a woman can admit her faults, it makes it easier for a man to face his. Her vulnerability doesn't weaken the connection, it strengthens it. There's nothing more powerful than a woman who's emotionally secure enough to say, I got that wrong, but I'm learning. That statement alone shows more confidence than any defense ever could. Because when you can acknowledge your own flaws, no one can use them against you. You disarm pride, you disarm ego, you lead with self-awareness, and that creates respect on both sides. And let's be honest, accountability takes courage. It's easy to point out what someone else did wrong. It's easy to say, you made me act that way. But it takes real courage to say, I could have handled that better and mean it. It's not about blame, it's about growth. Because growth isn't about always being right. It's about being willing to make it right. When a man sees a woman handle her mistakes with grace instead of guilt, with reflection instead of reaction, he sees someone he can trust. He sees someone who's strong enough to be real, humble enough to grow, and wise enough to know that accountability doesn't take away from her worth, it reinforces it. That's the kind of woman men respect, the one who's not afraid to own her truth, because she knows it doesn't make her weaker. It makes her unforgettable. There's something deeply magnetic about a woman who doesn't try to change a man, but somehow makes him want to change himself. She doesn't lecture, she doesn't push, she doesn't nag. She just lives in a way that sets a quiet example. Her strength, her calm, her self-respect, they speak louder than any words ever could. And when a man feels that kind of energy, it stirs something in him. It makes him want to rise, to meet her there, because her presence doesn't pressure him, it inspires him. See, men don't transform because someone tells them to. They change when they feel it's worth it. When they look at a woman and think, she brings out a better version of me, without even trying. That's not manipulation, it's influence. It's the kind of influence that doesn't demand, it attracts. Because she's not focused on fixing anyone. She's focused on being aligned with who she is, and that alignment creates its own gravity. The truth is, when a woman lives by her values, when she carries herself with both kindness and boundaries, it shifts the tone of every interaction around her. She doesn't need to convince anyone to treat her better. Her behavior sets that expectation naturally. A man starts to realize that to stand beside her, he has to bring peace, not chaos. Consistency, not excuses. And that's what respect looks like in action. Not fear-based control, but admiration-based effort. She understands that change doesn't happen by force. You can't love someone into their potential if they're not ready to meet it. But you can love yourself enough to not settle for less while they figure it out. And that's where her power is. She's patient, but she's not passive. She's understanding, but she's not a savior. She knows her worth, and because of that, she becomes the standard. When a man feels that, he starts to grow not out of obligation, but out of inspiration. He watches how she carries herself, how she handles conflict, how she stands firm without being cruel. And that balance makes him reflect. It makes him want to level up, not because she asked him to, but because being around her feels like peace, and peace is addictive. It's the kind of energy a man doesn't want to lose once he's felt it. What makes her so powerful is that she leads by example. She doesn't need to preach self-respect. She embodies it. She doesn't have to demand effort. Her presence requires it. And she never lowers her standards to keep someone close. Instead, she maintains them, knowing that anyone meant for her will rise to meet them. That silent confidence creates respect, not just in him, but in everyone around her. There's a difference between changing someone and inspiring them to change. One comes from control, the other comes from grace. And grace is what makes her unforgettable because she shows a man what emotional maturity looks like. She shows him that love doesn't mean losing yourself, it means growing together, but never at the cost of who you are. And that's what men respect most. The woman who doesn't give ultimatums, but gives examples, who doesn't argue to be understood, but lives in a way that can't be ignored. The woman who believes in his potential, but not at the expense of her peace. She doesn't push him to change, she simply becomes the reason he wants to. That's the kind of woman who leaves a mark that doesn't fade, because she never needed to fix anyone to be loved. She just stayed true to herself, and that truth became the very thing that changed everything around her.